Hi everyone, my name is Amy Jo Fogel and welcome back to the Spark Studio. Today we are talking to Sierra Peña, who is the leader of Generator, and she's doing amazing things in the Huntsville area. Very innovative person, just really an inspiration. So we're going to get to talk to her today and pick her brain about several different things. This is the 11th episode, so thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So to start out, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Sierra Peña. I'm currently the managing director for the Bronze Valley Investment Accelerator, managed or powered by Generator in Birmingham, Alabama. However, I used to run the programming here in Huntsville about a month ago, so it's been quite the transition. But before that, I honestly was like any normal person. I started off in the service industry. Actually, my first ever job was McDonald's. All through college, I was in the service industry. I hosted. I was a server. Worked in retail and entrepreneurship. I kind of landed in entrepreneurship by accident. After I graduated, I decided to move to Dublin, Ireland, where I worked at my first ever startup job. And this was kind of like a boutique marketing agency at the time. So it was a group of 5 of us. During my time there, the company grew to around 12 people. So it was very much like a small agency, but I learned a lot of fundamentals just around like sales and marketing. And at the time, I was an intern. So I was working for $100 a week and then worked my way up from intern to senior sales and marketing. Left Ireland because my visa expired, moved back home to Austin, Texas, and landed myself in the role of Uber Eats city launcher. So I was one of the first city launchers in Austin, was able to launch 7 cities across the southern regions and Midwest, and learned a lot there in terms of like what to do and what not to do when scaling big tech marketplaces. And what's funny is like you think of Uber now and it's such a massive corporation, but from my experience at least back in like 2018, 2019, Uber Eats was very much a startup and it was a new product line. So took my learnings there and really like have worked at startups ever since. I started my first small business when I was 24 years old. It was called Micro Markets, and this was kind of like a outdoor marketplace. So think like farmers market. I was hosting those on the side just to like earn extra income on top of
That is so cool.
Yeah.
I love that. That's awesome.
So I started doing that, and that was like, it was a crazy time of life. Like honestly, I started it because I needed to survive. Like I had my 9 to 5 working at another kind of startup and wasn't making anything, and saw a gap in the market, which was a lot of these small businesses, all of these micro businesses needed an additional way to sell their products. And I kind of just created one day, like just an idea of creating like an outdoor market. So grew that to about 20 markets a month, which I mean, again, that time of my life was insane. I was like 9 to 5 and then like 5 to 10 working on like stuff for my small business. And then on weekends was running around like hosting these markets across different venues in town. But interestingly enough, so I did that for 2 years. And one problem that kept coming up over and over again was the fact that my vendors wanted to get their products into retail stores. And they didn't know how to. So these were, again, micro businesses. They weren't generating like millions of dollars in revenue, but they were also looking for additional sales channels. So kind of took that problem and created my initial, and I call it my initial MVP of what was later to become Shelf Fleet, which was my first venture-backed business. But yeah, I started off like connecting my vendors to local retail shops in Austin and taking like a really small connection fee. And it was interesting. So I ended up connecting at the time, it was like 8,000. We were generating around 8K in monthly recurring revenue. And this was purely just me manually connecting my vendors to local retail shops. And then eventually that evolved into what would become Shelf Fleet, which was a tech-enabled shelf rental platform for online brands who are looking for physical distribution. Was able to raise my first institutional check by the age of 25. And it's funny because, I went through the ups and downs and made all of the mistakes that entrepreneurs make. And it's just kind of a full circle moment stepping into this role as managing director over the last month and actually writing checks for founders in Alabama. So that's a little bit about me.
That was amazing. I feel like I just listened to 4 lifetimes in one lifetime.
It feels like it.
Something that piqued my curiosity was the market. So can you just break down what that looked like? And because you said you would do that on the weekends, right? So you had your 9 to 5, and then on the weekends you'd focus on that. Can you tell me what that was like? I'm very intrigued by this concept. I've never heard this before.
I mean, think of it like a farmer's market, like the host who sets everything up. So what we would do is partner with different venues around town. My initial beachhead, because I did come, from Uber Eats, and I had a bunch of connections in Austin with different like restaurant owners and like bar owners. I just hit up my connections and I was like, hey, like you have all of this extra space in your parking lot. I know you're looking for additional foot traffic on maybe a day that you don't really expect many, people to come in. So we started doing markets on weekends. And my value prop to these business owners was like, look, we're going to bring you new customers and we're going to create a good experience while they're enjoying their food or beer, wherever the market was. And eventually that turned into us doing it not just on weekends, but during the weekday. So at one point I had to get my little sister involved. My dad would help me. We got the whole family involved because frankly, I just couldn't do it alone.
Absolutely.
And that was probably one of looking back at it, I mean, I had so much fun. It was such a hustle. And I think that was really it's the spirit of entrepreneurism, is like that hustle, that grit, and just finding ways to make it happen. And it's something that I, coach and encourage all of my founders to do that I work with today. In reality, I studied philosophy and just was bored and wanted to move to Ireland. I really don't have a clear explanation as to what actually took me there. I was born on March 17th, on St. Patrick's Day, so maybe that played. Yeah, maybe that subconsciously played into, my thought process behind that. But I moved to Ireland right after I graduated. And frankly, when I initially moved there, I just graduated and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I was in the service industry because that's all I knew what to do. The first thing I did when I arrived was I tried to look for a hospitality job, and I was a server most days at a local restaurant. And I also was a nanny too during the day. So during the day I was a nanny, and at night I served people at a restaurant. And then the opportunity arrived actually a couple months into that. So I was hustling away, just trying to make ends meet. And by the way, I didn't just walk on as a full-timer for the position in Ireland for the boutique marketing agency, or it was really a startup marketing agency. I started as an intern, initially for $100 a week. And I did that for a few months, and it taught me so much. But it was $100 a week living in Dublin, Ireland, where things are pretty expensive. And I eventually convinced my boss, hey, can you give me $200 a week? That was a couple months in. And I still had to work. So 9 to 5, I was, learning as much as I could on the job during that internship. And it was doing a lot of grunt work, a lot of lead generation, looking for clients that this marketing firm could serve. And it was, calling people, popping into restaurants or, potential clients and trying to sell door to door, basically. And then I'd come home 5 to 9 working at the restaurant down the street. So it was really hard. My 20s were a challenge for me. It was really like it was challenging, but again, looking back at it, I actually think it set the perfect foundation to be an entrepreneur. And, I recommend all of my founders, if you've never held like a service or retail job, like try doing it for a couple weeks, volunteer. I mean, at one point, as I was running the markets, even kind of fast forwarding to that, like I volunteered to work at a retail store to understand what the user journey was going to be like when I started kind of my, tech company after the market. So it's like just understanding that it's important to be customer focused, I think is what all of my service jobs and what Ireland really taught me.
So all of the, I guess you could say, hustle and bustle of your 20s, moving to a new place, $100 a week is insane. And nannying, retailing, and then opening up your market that you had when you came back to Texas, that's all, like you said, laying the foundation for taking risks and things like that as an entrepreneur.
100%.
That is so cool. That's really inspiring because you talk to a lot of people in their 20s and they just expect it to be easy. I feel like I did for sure. And then you get into it and you're like, this is difficult. This is something I have to put effort in.
Look, I have a little sister. She's 6 years younger than I am. And your 20s and arguably even your 30s is the time when you should be taking the most risks. Like I got everything out in my 20s, everything out of my system. I moved to an entirely new country. I started a business. I've raised institutional money. I feel like I've done it all. And now stepping into my 30s. And by the way, I just turned 30 this year. Thank you. No, but seriously, like I feel like I just got everything out of my system and I've learned so much along the way. And yeah, if you're in your 20s, if you're in college listening to this podcast, that's probably my biggest message. It's just take a leap of faith. Like, what's going to happen? Seriously, what's the worst thing that could happen?
That's awesome. So we talked about Dublin and coming back. This most recent transition, what has that been like for you, the adjustment? What does that look like so far?
It's been crazy. So I moved to Alabama almost 2 years ago, which is insane to think about. I initially started off running programming here in Huntsville, met some incredible entrepreneurs, and I still think to this day, Huntsville is like the most dynamic market across all of Alabama from an entrepreneurial standpoint. So I was running program here for about 1.5 years, was recently offered this position about a month ago. And I went from our showcase in Huntsville to less than 12 hours later, driving to Birmingham and moving my entire life and starting my first day of work with Bronze Valley. So there hasn't been, we should do a follow-up podcast because there hasn't really been a moment for me to really process everything and just like take a deep breath and be like, okay, I just haven't really processed this transition. But what I will tell you, and I could speak on the transition from Austin to Alabama because that's fairly recent and I was probably my biggest transition. Like Huntsville to Birmingham is only like 1.5 hours away. So from like moving to a new city like that, it wasn't that big of a deal because it was just, again, 1.5 hours away. But from Austin to Alabama, that was a pretty big move for me. And it was definitely like a risk too. Like I had just lost my business. I was going through this mourning process with my startup. I lost my co-founder. I mean, it wasn't a good time in my life. I was kind of going through a lot. And when this position was offered in Alabama, it almost seemed like it was like a leap of faith for me. And it was very scary. And I was moving to an entirely new state. I didn't know anybody here. I had never been to Alabama. So like even culturally, it's like very different than Texas.
What were your expectations coming to Alabama?
I didn't have any expectations. No, truly, I didn't have any expectations. And I thought that this was going to be a short-term thing for me. I thought I was going to be here for maybe like 6 to 8 months and then move back to Austin.
Wow. And how long
It's
were
been
you
2
here?
years.
2 years.
It's been 2
Wow.
years. And I like it here. I love it here. My sister's in Alabama now. We're getting the whole family moving
That's
here.
great. Bring them all.
But that was a very scary transition for me. And it wasn't, even moving to Ireland wasn't as scary as like moving to Alabama.
Really?
And I think it was where I was at in life. You know, mourning my startup and, you know, going through everything I was going through a couple of years ago or 2 years ago. It was a lot of unknowns. At least in Ireland, I kind of knew what I was signing up for. It was meant to be an adventure. This very much felt like, oh man, like I'm starting over. But it's been a lot of fun. And I honestly am so grateful for this opportunity and even to have met you and to be having this conversation.
What kind of advice would you give to someone who is younger? And we've already kind of talked about, you know, those transitions, navigating those. But as a woman who'd reach out to other women on LinkedIn, you know, kind of discovering what you wanted to do, what is some advice you would give to someone that says, no, I want to go into entrepreneurship? What is that advice that you would give them?
I mean, it's just do it. I don't know. Yeah, honestly, apart from like finding those 2 mentors, every entrepreneur should be able to sell and sell themselves to a certain degree. So I would say if you're considering entrepreneurship, look at yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, can I sell? Like if I can't sell the product that I'm building, whether it's a technical product or whether it's a market, like a farmer's market, really as an entrepreneur, like you need to be able to sell. And that's why I kind of tie this back into, you know, being in the service industry. It's very much like a people's industry, and like the service space is that way, but even entrepreneurship is that way too. So especially here in Huntsville, there's a lot of technical talent. I work with a lot of technical founders. And one of the things that I ask my founders is like, okay, like put your product aside, who are your customers? Like, let's dig in deep there and just start selling. I think the other piece of advice I would give to any aspiring entrepreneur is just, I don't know if everybody has it in them to be an entrepreneur. Like you'll go through periods of time where life just absolutely sucks. It's super lonely. Financially, you know, it's not great either. You have to really be willing to bet on yourself and take a risk. And you're going to have moments you're going to have hard moments, and really got to ask yourself, like, is this something I truly want to do? Because sometimes entrepreneurship can be suffering. It is, like, I suffered quite a bit. And I think if you ask any of my founders, they would have periods of time where they would say the same thing. Like it's a hard journey.
So moving forward with your company, you know, the new role that you stepped into, what are you most excited for? What are you kind of seeing as your greatest challenges right now?
I am most excited to learn. Yeah, I am excited to learn from the Bronze Valley team. I'm excited to learn from the entrepreneurs going through my program. Stepping into more of an investment role has been very different than any of my other roles. So I'm kind of like on the other side of things. I remember when I was an entrepreneur pitching 100+ times to investors before getting my first check written. And I remember that first check writer too. His name was Dave Matthews from RevTech out in Dallas, Texas. And I flew from Austin to Dallas just to pitch him in person at La Madeline, actually. Wow. We met at a coffee shop. It was the first time meeting him. And I could have easily done it like over Zoom, but I wanted to really show him that I was like serious. So flew over to Dallas. He wrote me my first $50K check. But it's interesting being on the other side of things. So I'm really just learning the ropes of like, okay, I know what it takes to be a good entrepreneur, but what does it take to be a great investor? And my goal is, I want to invest in the best and brightest here in Alabama and really empower the founders going through my program to not make the same mistakes that I did, because I made a lot of mistakes. I've also had some wins, but man, the mistakes it's really what builds character. And it's something that I want to teach my founders. Yeah, I'd say learning is something I'm really looking forward to.
Moving forward into this investment role that you have right now, can you tell me what it's going to be like balancing rest with ambition and trying to figure out, I'm stepping into this new role, but also I'm trying to keep time for my personal life, because I know that's something that you kind of talked about earlier with, moving a lot and all your jobs. So
yeah. That's something I'm still trying to figure out. I didn't rest at all. And even I didn't rest at all in my 20s. And even now I'm still trying to figure out what the perfect recipe for that is. I think it's important, and it's something that I tell my founders. At one point in my entrepreneurship career, like I said, it's really hard. I didn't have any time for myself. One point I lost like 20 pounds. I wasn't eating. I was stressed. My hair was falling out. I was just so stressed because, I was trying to make my dream come true, and I was giving it all. And I've learned not to do that. I've learned that it's important to find that work-life balance. Otherwise, you're going to get so burnt out, you can't even focus on your business. So it's something that I preach, and I've been kind of on the extreme on the extreme end of just not prioritizing myself. At the same time, like, I would be lying to you right now if I said that I've found, what the answer is there. I truly don't know. But I'm also, I've hit 30, and this is a very real conversation women have to have with themselves. Is okay. Like, I'm at the point in my career where, like, I want a family. I am happy with where I'm at in my career. And of course, like, there's always that next milestone. And, I'm always going to be striving for more and more. Like, that's never going to go away, especially if you're career driven and focused on like achieving. There's always something more you could achieve. So I think what I'm trying to tell myself is there's always that, like, you're always going to be striving for more. And that's great. Now that you've accomplished, so much, why don't you, not take a step back, but give yourself some time to like figure out, the personal stuff. Because I do think being a woman it's just really hard to balance. That's not something that men really have to balance as much as women. Yeah. And it's not a conversation that I think we're having enough. In fact, I'm currently looking for a female mentor to help me kind of navigate this new transition in life, which is kind of finding that balance between work, life, and family. So yeah, I don't have the answers there, but just know that, like, you aren't what you accomplish. You're not your work. It might feel like that, and I still feel like that sometimes, but your identity and who you are is completely separate from like what you do.
I totally agree. One time I heard this saying that it was rest is productive, because I feel like oftentimes we paint rest and taking breaks as taking a chunk out of your productivity, but it's actually fueling you and enabling you to be more productive.
Yeah. I mean, I still feel guilty sometimes for just taking a nap. Like, but like, give yourself, I mean, I try to give myself, I'm a lot better now, but I really try giving myself that grace to like take rest when needed. And, I think it's really important.
I totally agree with that. And that's something that needs to be talked about more, because we're so focused on accomplishing things that I feel like sometimes we forget, okay, what happens when you do?
I think the startup world also there's a toxic side to it. Especially, I don't know if you've seen the show Silicon Valley at all. It's like this hustle culture, like, working 24/7, like tech bros behind the screen, like coding, at just odd hours of the day, and like not actually taking time to like work out and like just rest and taking time for yourself. Like there is that toxic culture to entrepreneurism, and to some degree, like you need to be intense about your work. But I also think that there's kind of this new era of entrepreneurism where, work-life balance is important, and this kind of hustle, like toxic culture that we've been promoting for so many years is so long. Oh my gosh. Like I think it's slowly, hopefully diminishing, but I think it needs to be talked about more. And I think that, I really try encouraging my founders to like, hey, in fact, I was just having this conversation with one of my founders going through my current program. Like he is burnt out. And I'm like, hey, your homework is to go to sleep for me. Go to bed.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, great. Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming out. If people want to reach you, how will they contact you?
You can email me, sierra.pena@generator8.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So email Sierra.
LinkedIn, yeah.
Contact her if you have any questions, anything you want to follow up about. Thank you so much for joining us for today's episode in the Spark Studio. Tune in to see episode 12, which is coming up soon. Thank you.